and welcome to your Access Point to Washington. I'm Aisha Tanzim. After 8 days of bloodshed in Israel and Gaza and a flurry of diplomatic activity, finally, ceasefire.
The United States welcomes the agreement today for a ceasefire in Gaza. For it to hold, the rocket attacks must end, a broader calm return. I want to thank President Morsi for his personal leadership to de-escalate the situation in Gaza and end the violence.
While a few rockets were fired after the ceasefire was implemented, it is still holding as we speak. But for how long? Joining me in our Washington studios to talk about this and much more is Omar Badr, a political scientist, a human rights activist, and a new media professional. And on Skype from Washington, Mr. Paul Sham will join us shortly. He's a visiting professor of Israel Studies at the University of Maryland. And also from London, Mr. Sameh Akram Habib has joined us. He's a Palestinian journalist from Gaza. He also works in the media department of the Palestinian Return Center. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let me start with you, Omar. How long will this ceasefire hold? Both sides seem like ceasefire's on, but we're also ready for a return to violence.
I think that the ceasefire is going to hold for a while at least. The big question, I think, is whether there is an easing of the blockade and the siege that is imposed on Gaza. If there is a genuine easing of that blockade so that life in Gaza can return somewhat to normal, I think the ceasefire could hold on for a while. But if the conditions in Gaza do not change and Israel remains in total military control of the area, continues with regular military incursions and so on, then I think it's just a matter of time before there's another outbreak of violence.
Now, Mr. Habib in London, can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay, wonderful. What I want to ask you is, after the ceasefire was implemented, there were a few rockets fired from Gaza. They might not be elements of Hamas. They might be elements of, Islamic Jihad or some other group. How is Hamas going to control that territory? How do we know that those elements will not come into play again?
Well, I think the rockets that were fired, it was shortly before the start of the ceasefire. And it was as a retaliation for the Israelis, because Israelis are used to fire as much as they can in the last few minutes before any ceasefire starts. So this is a stereotype confrontation that happens usually when there is an escalation between the two sides. As for the two parties, I mean, how Hamas would control the factions in Gaza, Hamas made it clear that everything is going to be all right until Israel is attacking the Palestinians. So Hamas, I don't think, would suppress any Palestinians from retaliating to Israel. If Israel, this is what Hamas is saying most of the time, if Israel is attacking Palestinians, then we're not going to suppress those factions. Let them just retaliate and respond to what the Israelis initiate. And this is this is how things are working at the recent time. Cast-led and now Israelis are the people who initiated the two wars against Gaza.
Yes, you may be right that this is a chicken and egg situation, and people in Gaza may be retaliating to what Israel's doing, and Israel in return is retaliating to what they're doing. But a few rockets were fired after the ceasefire was implemented, and I'll bring the question to you: how will Hamas control those factions from not taking the situation and making it worse?
Again, I think there have been minor violations from both sides, actually, right after the ceasefire. But the point is, you're never going to be able to fully control anybody from violating anything. What you're trying to do is resolve the situation politically so that the elements that are carrying out acts of violence become marginalized. And I think that's the core of the issue, is that there might be a rocket fired here and a bullet fired there and so on. But until, as long as there is no political solution to this conflict, as long as the Gaza Strip remains under occupation, as long as the Palestinian territories, generally speaking, remain under military occupation in violation of international law, I think we're always going to be in this situation where extremists are actually empowered and do not have the full backlash of the population against them. If, however, the occupation does end and Palestinians live free and prosperous lives, I think those individuals who do engage in acts of violence will simply have no sympathy whatsoever from the populations. So that's where the focus ought to be. It's about ending the occupation.
And ending the occupation. And you raise a good point. Let me ask Mr. Sameh again. Mr. Sameh, talking about ending the violence in Gaza and ending the occupation in Gaza, Israel did withdraw from Gaza a few years ago. It dismantled its settlements, took all its people out, left Gaza open. in the hopes of better relationships with the people in Gaza, and yet after more violence from Gaza, it had to then go back to occupation. So why did Hamas do that?
Well, let's just be clear and let your audience know what is the reality of what is going on. The Israeli withdrawal from Gaza was a neutral, it has done it by its own. It didn't cooperate with the Palestinians, and it was a tactical withdrawal in which it has taken 8,000 settlers who were inside Gaza, occupying more than 40% of the Gaza Strip, and it has redistributed them in the West Bank settlements, which is all illegal settlements. Yet it remained controlling the Gaza seashores and the air of Gaza and the crossings of the Gaza Strip. So let's be clear about it. Israelis did not withdraw from Gaza. Israelis have changed the way they administrate and control Gaza. And this was clear over the past 7 years since their withdrawal from Gaza. We've witnessed a very tight siege in which Israelis have banned the very basics from entering the Gaza Strip, and then they've bombarded people. And maybe it's a bit justified when those people are in a concentration camp like. It's justified how they retaliate and how they fire rockets in Israel. What do you expect from those traumatized people who are being attacked consistently by Israel from time to time? People of Gaza did not have the rest for a long time, really. Since 1967 are being they're being attacked, they're being suppressed by Israel for a long time. And this is
okay, you may be right, but let me ask this question to Mr. Badawi. He may be right that Israel did not vacate Gaza. It may have been a tactical step, but in a situation this tense, baby steps are also important.
Yeah.
So the world community looks at it and at least says that step was not matched from the other side.
Yeah, I do not think that it was a step that was done in good faith. That's the thing. If this was a genuine step from the side of Israel to basically try to give Gaza a chance to see what becomes of it, I think that was a public relations point. It was a talking point that was used. That's how they tried to portray it, but that's not the reality on the ground. I mean, consider the fact that the United Nations still considers Gaza to be occupied, despite the fact that Israel withdrew its settlers from it. Withdrawing settlers and soldiers from within a territory is not the same as ending control of it. And the airport in Gaza has been bombed. There are no planes that can come in and out of Gaza. The entire Israel is in control of the shores and regularly fires at fishermen who are trying to fish off the coast of Gaza, and ships are not allowed in. And for a while there, before the flotilla incident a couple of years ago in which several people were killed, they were not allowing food items into Gaza. That's not an...
I understand what you're saying, and I understand what Mr. Sameh is saying. What I'm saying is, in a situation this tense, when you're not just in a war of weapons, you're also in a public relations war. Yeah. Even if Israel did it as a tactical public relations tactic, and the public relation tactic worked. While on the other side, rather than saying, okay, even if you're doing it for face value, we're going to show we can be peaceful. But that wasn't shown.
I think the problem here is with what kind of violence gets media attention. I mean, that has been the problem with American media, is that it adopted wholesale Israel's narrative that it was forced to respond to a rocket fire from Hamas. If you look at the details, the timeline, it's simply completely incorrect. Only a couple of days before the firing of rockets, there was a 13-year-old Palestinian boy who was killed in Gaza. A couple of days before that, a mentally disabled man was shot in what Israel unilaterally imposed in Gaza as a buffer zone. Again, I don't want to get into the tit-for-tat over who started what. I think there is a fundamental problem, and I go back to it, is that as long as this occupation continues, we're going to keep having these arguments over who fired which bullet first. But the entire world, through the United Nations, agrees that the Palestinian territories are illegally occupied. The entire world has been voting every single year for Israel to end that occupation so that we can have two states. The Palestinians have agreed to it. The entire Arab League has agreed to it. And Israel is blocking it. And until they cease blocking the political solution to this problem, we're going to continue seeing the cycle of violence continue.
Okay. Mr. Paul Sham, we have you on the phone. I'm glad we were trying to get you on Skype. I wish we could, but we have you on the phone. Is Israel blocking a political solution?
I think you have a total lack of trust on both sides. The Israeli government and the population at this point don't think that Palestinians, even the Palestinian Authority, let alone Hamas, is ready to accept Israel. And the political force, I guess, coming from the U.S. isn't directed enough towards making them realize it's possible. So I think at this point, the political conditions aren't possible. I think also Hamas has to modify more obviously its own willingness to coexist with Israel. They've given a variety of hints, but given the Hamas charter and frequent calls for the destruction of Israel, it's understandable that Israel doesn't think it can live with Hamas.
Mr. Paul Sham, don't you think that Hamas's calls for destruction of Israel are just a PR ploy just to keep a card in their deck so that if they negotiate, they can use it? After all, Al-Fatah was also a terrorist organization in the eyes of U.S. and Israel, and now they're the moderates. And Hamas, in their interviews, have shown that if a negotiation happens, they will not oppose Israel to the bitter end. If there is a negotiation that all of Palestinians can be part of, Hamas leaders have said they will let the Palestinian people decide.
I think personally that Israel absolutely should test that. However, given the reality of post-Holocaust Israel, I think the outside perception that Hamas doesn't mean what it says is something that's very hard for most Israelis, even many with goodwill, to accept. So I think I accept what you say. Most Israelis don't.
Okay, let's move on to another topic. And I also want to bring in a Facebook question that I think we've already answered, but I'll read it anyway. Mr. Wasim Ahmed said that we're hopeful for permanent peace in Gaza, but we want to know what are the actual reasons of continued violence in Gaza. I think Mr. Badayu and Mr. Habib in London have answered that already. Let's move on to Egypt's role in this new scenario.
Would it be possible to comment real quick on Hamas before we move to that?
Yes, go ahead.
There's no question that between their refusal to renounce violence against civilians and their domestic right-wing religious agenda, I'm personally not a fan of Hamas. But I think we ought to be clear about two things. First of all, yes, indeed, their charter does not accept Israel's existence. But on the other hand, they've published writings in Western newspapers like the Washington Post and the New York Times, essentially hinting that they're willing to accept a two-state solution possibly. Now, but let's accept that their political position is problematic, which I definitely do. What brought them into power? What gave them any legitimacy? For between 1993 and 2006, Israel had the Palestinian Authority to deal with, which was much more compromising, accepted Israel's existence, renounced violence, and so on. And what did Israel do? Did it solve the conflict? It didn't. It continued the occupation. And when the occupation continued for that long and the Palestinian population saw that they had no hope of realizing their right to a state, that's why extremists got empowered. So if Israel is serious about dealing with a more moderate Palestinian Authority than with Hamas, all they have to do is show good faith steps towards ending the occupation, and they've done nothing of the sort, and that has been the problem.
Mr. Sham, I'll come to you, Mr. Habib, after I ask Mr. Sham. Do you agree with this, that Israel has a hand in empowering Hamas?
I think Israeli actions have accomplished that. The problem with what you were just saying is you treat Israel as a monolith. The fact is, as you know, Israeli people come in all shades. And I don't think Hamas or Palestinian politicians from the moderate parties have really tried to understand the reasons for Israel's refusal to extend itself. You may find that Israel is being recalcitrant. Certainly, there's a strong right wing that has no interest in a viable compromise. Most Israelis, polls have shown, believe in a two-state solution, but like Palestinians, they can't believe it's going to happen. So the people-to-people distrust is the main obstacle, and that's why Israel elects right-wing politicians.
And I guess that's the same reason. That's the same reason that Palestinians have elected Hamas, and as you say, Israel has elected right-wing politicians. Mr. Habib in London, you are actually from Gaza. How popular is Hamas in Gaza?
Well, I fully agree with your guest on his comments on Mr. Paul. And let me add a quick point, really. They want Hamas to recognize Israel, but the question that should be put here forward to Israel is, do you recognize the Palestinian people? The answer is no. They recognize the PLO as a legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, but factually, they don't recognize us and our right to exist. If they do, they should have at least recognized the Nakba and the mayhem and the pain that they've caused for the Palestinians. As for your question regarding Hamas popularity, for the past few years, within the siege, the tight siege that Israel imposed on Gaza, Hamas lost some of its popularity. But after this military operation, Hamas popularity is skyrocketing. Hamas, I think if an election would be held now, Hamas would get a landslide majority, because the Islamic Jihad is not going to get into elections. They are not into it. While the other big Palestinian faction, Fatah, has nothing to bet about, really. There is nothing that Fatah had given to the people over the last 20 years since Oslo. They have the United Nations States bid, which I think, or maybe I don't think it will happen. Let's just see what the Palestinian Authority would do. But I think,
they're going to make next,
for your question, if elections would happen, Hamas would win.
Yeah, the UN bid that they're going to make next week, and we'll see how that goes. But you bring it back to the same point, which is Hamas will gain from this. But I guess so will Netanyahu's government. Wasn't it, Mr. Sham? Was the decision to take this action and escalate this violence at this time based on domestic political interests of Mr. Netanyahu, given that elections are coming up?
I think that's part of the context. But the Israeli perception of Hamas is that it has no real interest.
Okay,
permanent relationship, and therefore I think there was considerable political pressure on Netanyahu to do this. But I think the election is part of it, and I think Hamas and Netanyahu have improved their political position through this war.
Both sides have gained political momentum through this war, as you just suggested. Both sides are claiming victory, and we'll discuss that and much more. But let's come to the new Egypt, the new leadership of Egypt and its role, Mr. Badr. How important is it that this time the deal was not just made by Washington, but by Cairo?
Yeah, it's, I mean, President Morsi has a very thin line to play here. On the one hand, he does not want to damage relationships with the United States, but on the other, he cannot behave the same way Mubarak did. And I think he managed it pretty decently in this crisis. On the one hand, he definitely went beyond what Mubarak had done. He called back the ambassador to Israel. He filed an official complaint. He pushed very aggressively for a ceasefire and was able to bring the parties together and bring that agreement about. So that's already a step ahead of what Mubarak had done. And I think they're reasserting themselves to play a major role in Middle Eastern politics. And on the other hand, they did not take any extreme steps that would alienate the United States. So I think it's still too early to tell what Egypt's long-term policy is going to be. But in the meantime, they're playing this balancing act fairly well.
They've come in as a leader and all sides are hailing it. Now, we have a Facebook question, Mr. Habib. I want you to answer it, and then I'll go to Mr. Sham so that we get both sides. And Mr. Asmat Wazir is asking on Facebook, what's the last possible solution to the Israel-Palestinian issue which may be acceptable to both sides and also to Arab and European countries? And if that's not possible, then what are the options for Palestinians? Well, that's the crux of the issue. Mr. Habib.
Well, within the school of the pessimistic people about the conflict, I don't see any close solution to what is going on now. But on my own view, I think a one-state solution is the most valid solution at the moment, given the fact that Israelis have buried down the two-state solution by building more and more illegal settlements. They have given no room for this two-state solution. And I think Israel is, if they really are interested in peace, they should show their readiness by dismantling these settlements and give the Palestinian the chance to rule themselves. This is number one. Number two, Israelis would argue that the one-state solution is not able to be implemented, but I think it is really. There is a big room now, according to Salman Abu Sutta, a famous historian, Palestinian historian. He demonstrated that there is a big room, a space to host some more 7, 5, 6 millions of the Palestinian refugees. And if Israel allows these refugees inside Palestine, I think it's done.
Mr. Habib, by one state, you mean one large state with Israelites and Palestinians living in one state?
Yes, a secular democratic state, I guess everyone would be satisfied. Okay. But again, Israelis will not agree on this. The main concern for Palestinians is the right of return. If Israelis allow the Palestinian refugees the right to go back to their own villages and homes, I think any solution would be applicable on the table.
Mr. Sham, what is the possible solution, and is the one-state solution an option for Israel?
I don't think one state is even conceivable because it's out of the frying pan into the fire. Israelis at least accept two states in the principle. You'll have wall-to-wall opposition for anything like one state. So I think even if you think it's workable, which I don't, politically it's inconceivable. If you can't get something that Israelis will accept, how can you get something that they absolutely reject? I think two states for two peoples, and the Palestinians will have to give up and recognize, as most politicians accept privately, even Hamas, I think, understands it. The right of return can't happen.
So, Mr. Sham, let me ask you one thing, and I know, Mr. Habib, I know you disagree. I'll come to you to counter that. Mr. Sham, one thing that's a big hurdle in the two sides coming to the table and talking about the two-state solution is the settlements. Now, can you please explain what's the thinking behind the settlements if they have to be eventually dismantled anyway, like they were in Gaza, and if they're not a ploy to take over more real estate as Palestinians claim that they are, then why build them?
They're being built because of the internal Israeli political dynamic. I am not defending this, but the fact is the perhaps 30% of the Israelis who believe passionately that God gave the land of Israel to Jews and only Jews, at this point have a stranglehold on Israel with regard to settlement. You have people like Netanyahu who believes in settlement. I think he could be pushed into dismantling them. But this point, for Israeli political reasons, it's not possible, given the lack of belief in a settlement, that Israel will dismantle them, even though I agree that with most of them there, with them spread out through Palestine, a settlement can't be reached until they are dismantled, or at least most of their area is
Exactly,
taken.
and that's one of the issues that needs to be discussed in a final solution. Now, we only have a few minutes left, so very quickly I'll come to each of you. Umar Badr, first to you. Will the U.S. administration in the second term have to pay more attention to Middle East peace?
It has to, if it does not want to become completely politically irrelevant in this issue. I mean, Obama's approach so far has been very, very disappointing. He's continued the policy of one-sidedly providing military support and diplomatic support to Israel without ever showing, he did it at the very beginning of his first term, where he was pushing for a complete and total halt in Israeli settlement building. But
that backfired, though.
Yeah, it should not have backfired. He should have pressed on it, but because he did not want to deal with the domestic pressure, he ended up backing off of it. And I think that at this point, unless he insists on it, the two-state solution is more or less going to be dead. And it's really in the hands of the American administration at this point for the Obama administration to make a decision. Either we push for a comprehensive peace solution right now, which requires American pressure on Israel, or he backs off and we're dealing with indefinite conflict with potentially a one-state solution way down the road. So it's really up to the American administration at this point and up to us as American citizens.
To push the administration. Mr. Habib, is there more chance now with a new administration in Egypt and Obama in his second term not running for re-election that this issue could be brought front and center and actually be dealt with?
Not America, not America. I think the Americans are totally one-sided with double standard in dealing the issue of the Middle East. They are totally supporting Israel with more than $3 billion military aid per year. I think the Americans and the American administration are not ready to stand as a neutral mediator in which they are dealing with the both sides equally.
Then? Who would the Palestinians accept as a broker? I mean, America has been the only broker so far. Who would the Palestinians accept in place of America?
Well, any neutral mediator, impartial mediators who are dealing both parties equally.
Okay.
Not even the EU who are being represented by Tony Blair, who has a very bad history in Iraq.
Okay, thank you. And we only have Mr. Paul Sham only have 30 seconds. Would the new administration have to take this issue?
I'm a bit more hopeful, given the positive actions of Obama in engaging President Morsi. That said, I think given American domestic political reality, the chances are against Obama doing what's necessary to make a solution happen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul Sham. Now, this issue, we can never talk about it enough. I was just telling our guests that half an hour is nearly enough to talk about this issue. So we'll bring it up again. But today, our time is up. I want to thank our guests, Mr. Paul Sham in Washington, Mr. Sami Habib in London, and Mr. Umar Badr in our studios. Thank you very much. And you too for watching. Leave your comments about this show and ideas about future shows. Goodbye and good night.